Well, there are plenty of new offensive coordinators around the National Football League, and we're here to talk the fantasy impact of some of those this week on the Audible. Today's show, we're going to be doing a small handful of teams, Bloom, but we've got more as the turnover is there. And I believe before we jump into the teams, Bloom, this is
Yeah.
something all fantasy GMs need to be well versed in is like, what kind of changes could these coaches be bringing?
Yeah, I think that we're in a good era of fantasy football where knowing the name of the offensive coordinator, knowing the name of the play caller is important, and it gives us context for things that happen, especially things that change. And we need to be paying attention to that. There's been a ton of turnover. About half of the offensive coordinators are new. And I think that not every single one of them is interesting because in some cases, like I think Cincinnati, it's just a succession thing. Zach Robinson is gone now. Brian Callahan's gone. Dan Pitcher moves up. Uh, but I think that there are some that are extremely interesting. And the other thing I'll say is just an aside, like put a pin in this. Last year, I became pretty fascinated in the idea of not first year offensive coordinators, although some first year offensive coordinators are a big deal simply because of who they succeeded, right? Like, see, whoever was coming after Matt Canada, we're going to be optimistic that the offense will improve. How much will it improve? We'll see. But whoever they hired has to be better than Matt Canada. Or when the Patriots had Patricia and Judge, well, Bill O'Brien maybe wasn't a success story, but there's that at least dead cat bounce for some of these offenses because the Nathaniel Hackett in Denver, because the offense was so bad. But then on top of that, some of these offensive coordinators can add with their schemes, with their play designs, with their play calls in some cases. But maybe in year two, like I'm thinking about Baltimore and Todd Monken. We got excited about year one, but the team really came on offense in year two or going into year two, December. That was when we saw the offense start to come into its own. So some of these offensive coordinators we talk about, Cease, maybe we'll come back to them next year.
Well, that sounds like another show, honestly. We'll
Yeah,
do second
yeah.
year OCs. Maybe that's a little bit later as we work through the off-season, non-playing season. You talk about offensive coordinators we know. How about one I literally know in Zach Robinson
Yeah.
there with the Atlanta Falcons? He was my son's quarterback coach. Of course, he was a Chatfield Charger legend, threw passes, plenty of passes at Oklahoma State to Des Bryant, got drafted by the Patriots, has worked outside of football with Pro Football Focus and worked inside with Sean McVay. You mentioned his various coaching stops. Now Zach Robinson gets a chance to be an OC. I think he's a future head coach. How fast that happens for him? Well, it depends on what he does with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix with the
Yeah.
Falcons now.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, if you're Zach Robinson, your job isn't necessarily tied to Michael Penix as intimately as say Raheem Morris or maybe even Terry Fontenot. So yeah, it's great. It's a luxury to have these two quarterbacks. Real quick, Cease, since you brought it up, and we have been talking about Zach Robinson forever. Reflecting, seeing how far he's come, on the cusp really of being a head coach candidate. Is there anything you can reflect on that maybe you've recognized, or now when you look back, that was like, yeah, maybe I'm talking to a future NFL head coach.
Yeah, a future NFL head coach because he understands defense so well, right? It's not just here's my design, here's my play structure. It's here's what the anticipatory call is based on what I think they're going to do, based on their tendencies. So with Zach, and
Mhm.
anytime I was able to talk to him, this is about high school football, but it was like you're studying your opponent so well, you could run their offense,
Right,
but you're running the
right.
home team's offense. And that allowed him to be a great quarterback coach and a mentor and just a great guy. And then obviously helped him in his work with Pro Football Focus and has clearly been a fast riser in NFL coaching circles.
Yeah, it's awesome, knowing your opponent, getting into the mind of your opponent, and, uh, that isn't gonna be as necessary in Atlanta. Why are we so optimistic here? Twofold. Again, it's Arthur Smith, and maybe Arthur Smith isn't the big deal. It's Desmond Ritter. It's
Mhm.
an offense in terms of the pass offense that just sputtered last year, even though they have so much talent. Now you have Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix if Cousins Achilles blows up again or something like that. But you also have Cousins coming into. You mentioned Sean McVay. I mean, it's Kevin O'Connell, whatever. There's not really a transition here for Kirk Cousins. They have a good offensive line. Like I said, he's surrounded by good talent. So Zach Robinson, and this is going to be something where this could be one where we don't have to wait for year 2. That year 1 is when we see the big change because it's going to be comfortable. There's not going to be an acclimation period for Kirk Cousins. And Cease, you also could just get that breath of fresh air feeling for guys like Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, where their usage was inconsistent last year. They really could take the places in the offense that they should be in. You also underrated add in Darnell Mooney because now you
Yes.
have these extra elements. Again, think about Cincinnati when you had Chase and Higgins and Tyler Boyd, and how all three of them presented a different quandary for the defense. Speaking of how's the defense going to approach their task. So adding a Darnell Mooney in his deep speed with Drake London, who can win one-on-one on the outside, Kyle Pitts in the middle of the field, Bijan Robinson out of the backfield, and Kirk Cousins being able to pilot everything as we see over the course of his career with efficiency, with quick decision making, and much like you described with Zach Robinson, understanding what he's looking at and knowing what to do when he sees what he sees.
Yeah.
This is pretty exciting. And again, how long will it be before you talk about Zach Robinson, NFL head coach, and sees it just like they told us, bump around the football world, meet people, wait long enough, and they rise to some pretty high heights.
Yeah. High locations. And, the guy that leaves Atlanta now is in Pittsburgh. So let's move on to the Steelers and discuss what the hell is Arthur Smith going to do
Yeah.
with Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields and a Fields package that Russell Wilson's okay with. Yeah, because he's going to take his job.
Right. This one's really interesting, Cease. There's Rorschach ink blots at the
Mm.
quarterback position and at Arthur Smith. I mean, at the play caller and offensive coordinator. And as I just said, I mean, the delta has to be a positive because Matt Canada's offense, even Kenny Pickett is probably excited to not be running Matt Canada's playbook, even if he is doing it as a backup in Philadelphia. And depending on what you think of Russell Wilson at this point in his career, what you think of Justin Fields, and part of that picture is how Chicago did or didn't develop him. You could be optimistic about the quarterback position here. At the very least, probably won't be as much of a limiting factor for the Steelers offense as it has been in the last few years. But then I'll ask you this, Cease. I'm going to throw this back to you. So what's the right take on Arthur Smith? He galaxy brained the Atlanta offense and had all this talent and didn't understand how to unlock it. And just the frustrated, sort of petulant presence we saw last year where he was listening to us too much. He cared too much about what we thought. He'd got lost track of the story, right? Or is it Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Titans, who made them a Super Bowl contender or was a big part of that? With Derrick Henry, and maybe it just happens that if you want to give Arthur Smith an offense, if you give him Mouse a cookie, if you give Arthur Smith an offense, you better give him a running back that is really the point of the spear. You see the way he even used Tyler Algier last year in that similar kind of role, and it was successful. So that Arthur Smith, A.J. Brown had no problem as a number one receiver, if we're going to talk about George Pickens.
Right.
Ryan Tannehill made a lot of money because of Arthur Smith, and no one can argue that given the elements he had, he got the most out of those elements with Mike Vrabel. So
You just said all the key words, Bloom.
Yeah.
By the way, you said all the key words. You said Vrabel, you said Henry, you said Tannehill. Because what it is the steady presence of Vrabel. Some guys just aren't head coaches. Arthur Smith's not a head coach. Sorry. Dick LeBeau wasn't a head coach. Sorry. Greatest defense coordinator of all time, in my opinion. Yeah, exactly. The list goes on and on. Wade Phillips. So what that says to me is Ryan Tannehill is better than we thought, than people gave him credit for, and Desmond Ritter's worse than people thought. And Arthur Smith wasn't cut out for that role. So now you enter Tomlin as your Vrabel.
Right.
Vrabel plus, because Tomlin's the man. And now you get this steadiness that you have, but then you have the fakeness of Russell Wilson. Yeah. So the faster Justin Fields is in there, I think the better it is for the Steelers. But Smith will be a breath of fresh air compared to what it has been with Steelers football.
Yeah. And Cease, because I want to be optimistic. I want to be optimistic as a Pittsburgh fan. Yeah, I want to think maybe the Pirates can become relevant again. And I want to see this reality manifest where not only here's the reality I want to see manifest. These I'll sum it up like this: that 6 months from now, I mean, it's not 6 months from now. It's June. like 8 months from now, the headline is Fields signs 4-year, $180 million deal with the Steelers with, $130 million guaranteed, like a Daniel Jones updated contract kind of.
Mhm.
And we're celebrating it as Steelers fans. And we're saying, bring it on, this era, because now the Steelers have the offense to hang with the Kansas City, to hang with, well, they can already hang with Baltimore and Cincinnati. That's not a problem. See, I saw a stat the Steelers are something like 34-14 in their last 48 division games. Wow. Mike Tomlin knows how to coach up a team to win the division, and having an actual offensive coordinator. Because look, as a Steelers fan, I'll put the Steelers fan hat on for a second. At least it was somebody outside of the organization. And at least it was something, because the problem with the Steelers had on offense was every time someone would get in the building that had good ideas, Ben Roethlisberger would chase them out,
Mhm.
right? I mean, the
Right.
real offensive coordinator for the Steelers for the last like 10 years of Roethlisberger's career was Roethlisberger.
Mhm.
And that was part of why the offense stagnated so much at the end. And then Matt Canada, even again, like it's like the Kenny Pickett thing. Like he literally was in the building on the South Side with the Panthers and the Steelers sharing facilities. But now Arthur Smith is something new, and I'm ready for it.
Yeah, ready for it, ready for a change. And Carolina's ready for something. Bryce Young was not good last year. Now with a new offensive coordinator and some different pieces, the Xavier Legette pick is very good. I certainly appreciate that. For everyone that loves Spencer Rattler, it wasn't him, it was Legette bailing out his bad quarterback. But let's talk about the Panthers, who hopefully don't have a bad quarterback in Bryce Young.
Yeah, and this is exciting, hopeful thing for the Panthers. Well, it's all you really have to pin your hopes on, but you should. Uh, Canales is an interesting guy because in the last 2 years, you saw what he did with Baker Mayfield, and then before that, with Geno Smith. So these are success stories. These are quarterbacks that previously we would have said there's not much there, and Canales said no, there's something there. And he comes out of Seattle, wide receiver coach for a long time, quarterback coach, passing game coordinator for the last few Russell Wilson years, and then back down to quarterback coach. You don't necessarily associate Seattle with offense, the Legion of Boom, and so on. But what he has done with quarterbacks the last 2 years, you must take heed of that. You also have the Panthers getting improvements on the offensive line at guard and center, right in front of Bryce Young. So you hope you add Deontay Johnson. So you add for Bryce Young someone that can win consistently. Adam Thielen did that maybe in game situations that didn't matter, but Deontay Johnson can do it all the time.
Yeah.
So see, sometimes we're aided by low expectations. All that's asked of Canales and Bryce Young in this offense is to improve some. It's like the Matt Canada thing. Like just be more functional, do something. So we can build some momentum here because they're stuck with Bryce Young. And with Canales, you're in a really good situation that this offense is going to be able. I mean, his career is not going to be based on Bryce Young. He's not tied to Bryce Young. Uh, I think that Bryce Young can fail, and you can say, well, okay, Bryce Young failed. Now let's give him a chance to bring in whoever he wants. By the way, I haven't even mentioned Brad Idzik. I mean, he's the offensive coordinator, but Canales is going to be the play caller, and that's really, I think, what is going to matter here. So you have some optimism. Jonathan Brooks is another player. Looking over ADPs, I spent a lot of time looking at ADPs just to get a feel like what does the fantasy football community think of players and think of offense. They're not impressed with Carolina. They're not expecting much out of Carolina.
That
You
means
can see
value, though.
that means potential value.
Yeah, keep an eye on it. Put a pin in it, and we'll see during the preseason what it looks like. What does it look like for the Cleveland Browns? We know Stefanski and Andrew Berry getting their contract extensions earlier in the month of June. Okay, now Browns wise, giving Nick Chubb as much time as it takes to come back. Really, isn't this kind of a Nick Chubb conversation? And of course, Deshaun Watson.
Sure.
What do you mix in
Sure.
here? How does Jerry Judy
Yes.
look? Conversations that we'll certainly revisit the preseason watch list. But for now, how does the new Browns offense look with a bunch of old Browns?
Right. Cecil's like, how now, Browns offense? This is an offense that I'm smirking if you're watching on YouTube because it was kind of laughable with Deshaun Watson at times last year, how it was not a threatening offense. And you lose Nick Chubb at the beginning of the year, who really is the foundational, the emblematic player of this offense. And Alice Van Pelt is gone. He's in New England. Real quick aside, Cease, really quick, because you've got Dorsey, you've got Kellen Moore, you've got Van Pelt. Why is it that so many of these hires are guys that failed at their last stop? Why is the NFL willing to give new guys new ideas more of a chance?
Yeah, they're scared of change. They're scared of taking chances. Chip Kelly was made fun of when he was ushered out of this league. Now half the league wants to do what Chip
Yes,
Kelly was doing.
yes,
So it's
yes,
like, and then when it works, then people are like, oh, that's the new thing. It's not the new thing. Nothing's new in this league. And nothing's new because they keep recycling. Where's Pat Shermer at? Oh, yeah. For the love of God, he's ruining Shadur Sanders and Boulder as we
right,
speak. But yeah, it's the good old boy network is part of it. And part of
right.
it is just they're scared of change. And a little behind the scenes is that these guys put together their staffs when they're, assistants.
Mm-hmm.
You get my back, all right? If you get a job, I
Mm-hmm.
won't name names, but you and I know a pretty high level executive that all the time is like, hey, if that guy gets a job, then I'll be. And I'm like, okay, yeah. So there's handshakes and friendly agreements, and like you watch my back, I'll watch yours, because it's a cutthroat business.
It is. And the reason I ask you this question is because if you think that cocoon, good old boy network kind of thinking is counterproductive, then maybe you're not thinking this offense is going to improve very much. But it's all about Deshaun Watson. And they bring in Ken Dorsey pretty much specifically because of what he's done with Josh Allen and Cam Newton in the past. And Kevin Stefanski may remain the play caller. Jameis Winston, enter Jameis Winston, maybe scooped the Dorsey's the play caller. We're not sure, If Jameis Winston, if the
I
scoop
love
is from Jameis
Jameis.
Winston, you can't be sure. Did he say something he's not supposed to say? Because he might have said something he wasn't supposed to say. Because we're
Uh,
waiting to see who the play caller is going to be. But this all converges it to Deshaun Watson. It's the decision that's going to loom over this franchise for at least this year. But perhaps Jameis Winston could turn the story in a different direction if he is back out there. And maybe Ken Dorsey, on who the play caller is, won't matter as much because of the talent they have around there. This one, it's just a little bit of a head scratcher until you realize, like, yeah, they're trying to make that Deshaun Watson decision look good. So they're going to keep throwing resources after that decision. Is it good money after bad money? We'll see.
well, and then they can say, see, it didn't work. We've done everything. We've done
Yeah.
everything we could. It won't work,
Oh,
and
it's
then move on.
Cease. I don't hear it said often yet, although maybe I'm wrong. This is a make or break year for Watson. This is a make or break year.
1000%. Yes.
Teams are willing to move on from 60, 80, 100 million maybe of dead cap. We're seeing
Hmm.
teams willing to move on from these painful dead cap decisions at the quarterback position. So, Daniel Jones, Deshaun Watson, make or break years.
Yeah. Uh, it happens in this league, as Joe always says. Things change pretty quickly around here. And yeah, the Browns will be looking at changing things there. Now, this week on the Audible, we're doing new offensive coordinators. We did a little bit today. We'll do more on Thursdays. So make sure everyone to subscribe to our YouTube channels, plural. It's Football Guys the Audible. About half of you that watch aren't subscribed, so please subscribe. We have Football Guys Fantasy Football channel and the Football Guys Dynasty channel. Subscribe to all three, and then check out footballguys.com for our free daily newsletter. Takes every day, written by Bob Harris, Cecil Lammey, third person, Sigmund Bloom, and Joe Bryant. Hell of a coordinary. He is Sigmund Bloom. You follow him on Twitter, X at Sigmund Bloom. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying the show's at the Audible. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.